despised imposter turned fan-favorite kaiju of the Godzilla franchise. He's a character which did not fare well in the first part of this series, a fate in stark contrast to his progeny, Zilla Jr., who has seemingly thrived within the MonsterVerse. Which begs the question, can Zilla continue to grow and evolve? Can he withstand the greatest threats the universe has yet to reveal? These questions and more shall be answered as we further explore what if Zilla was in the MonsterVerse. Now, we've covered the first film in 14 episodes of Godzilla the Animated Series in the first part, ending right before the Monster Wars trilogy. But before we dive into the ambition of the Leviathan aliens, I need to set the stage of this part by discussing two extremely important factors, those being time and the invaders themselves. Starting off with the former, I've been using the broadcast date to get a rough idea of when every episode of Godzilla the Animated Series takes place, while using the production order to understand which events unfold first. To give an example, this means the 15th produced episode of the series would be Monster Wars Part 1, an episode which would roughly take place on March 6, 1999. However, the thing is, this would be a date the aliens would fail to achieve, and to understand why, we'll need to dive into the invaders themselves. A hive mind species located light years away, from the glimpses we see in the show, the alien race appears less like a galaxy-spanning civilization and more like a race in long-standing, or at least current, decline. The craft on Earth being abandoned for 65 million years, a craft I should say hasn't changed from the aliens' current lineup of ships, speaks to an alien race unable or unwilling to update their technology or even rescue members of their own kind. Also, the fact the species sent so few spacecraft, sent no monstrous reinforcements when the species is clearly capable of such monstrosities, and that they retreated so easily after taking minimal losses, solidifies this is an alien race unable to conquer worlds, let alone the technologically inferior human race. Their telepathic adeptness and biological mastery is impressive, sure, but with their alien flesh turning to dust upon contact with the open air, they face a battle worse than even the aliens within the film's signs. The slightest exposure of our atmosphere basically ensures their doom, meaning that the use of monsters to knock out humanity's defenses is a crucial necessity for planetary conquest, something unattainable to the aliens by March 1999 in this scenario. For one, any use of the tachyon particles would alert Godzilla, so the Leviathans wouldn't be able to create a stationary base on Site Omega to contact their homeworld and begin their slow assimilation of men and monsters. Instead, they'd need to rely on some kind of mobile platform which can evade Godzilla. This in itself would likely delay the invasion, though not as much as, a lack of a kaiju superweapon. With Zilla's obliteration in the first part, there is no Cyber Godzilla, not that the Leviathans would even choose to upgrade Zilla's corpse this time around. See, Cyber Godzilla was meant to be above the rest of the world's mutants to mimic the power of his progeny. But within the MonsterVerse, no cybernetic augmentation of any dead mutant would be able to match Godzilla or some of the other titans we've seen so far. Now, with King Ghidorah's frozen tomb being uncovered in the last part, couldn't the Leviathans awaken him to use as their spearhead against humanity? Awaken? Absolutely. Control? Not really. Mainly because, when watching the episodes, Elsie Chapman and Zilla are able to break free of the Leviathan influence of their own accord. A domineering mind such as King Ghidorah, one able to even surpass technological limits, shouldn't have any issue passing this will check. Thus, the Leviathans are forced to stir within the shadows of the MonsterVerse, waiting for their moment to strike. Some events of the Monster Wars would still occur though, like Heat having to deal with the giant bat in Nigeria. Do recall that due to Godzilla, mutants are not being captured in this timeline by the US military. Like their natural counterparts, artificial titans are establishing their own territory under Godzilla's dominion. And well, personally, I think the bat would be more so a protector in this scenario, a creature that will be openly hostile to humanity, sure, but when fed and given space by the local populace, could prove a valuable defender against a destroyer-class titan. Not that there are any really around. I mean, the closest titan is this guy, who I dare not try to pronounce, a titan in Outpost 75 located in Sudan. So far, far away from the giant bat in Nigeria. Regardless, the giant bat would be abandoned by Heat, as a mind collapse draws the team, not Ishiro Serizawa in this timeline, toward the Philippines. Corpse of an ancient Godzilla is discovered. Yet most pressing of all is the trail carved through solid rock leading to the sea. In the official Godzilla novelization, it takes 2 weeks for the parasite to reach Japan's mainland, which is roughly 1,800 miles. In that time, whether it be heat tracing the male's radioactive signature or Zilla hunting the parasite beneath the waves, I can't see things turning out well for the young parasite. Regardless of exactly where or when or how, the male never reaches Janjira. He is silenced beneath the waves, saving everyone at the Janjira nuclear site from the Titan's attack, and yes, that does include the Brodies. Also, thanks to better diagnostic technology in Nigel, I can see the female parasite not getting one over on the US military. She isn't shipped to Nevada where she can siphon radioactive power and grow. Instead, it's likely she's taken to some remote facility and given a steady, if low, amount of radiation, enough to keep her alive and ensure she's not a threat to anyone or anything. So this is all good news, right? A crisis stopped, lives saved, an unparalleled success even Yoshiro Serizawa can get behind. So what's the problem? Well, unaware to Heat, or Zilla, or even Godzilla, a long dormant apex titan stirs. For without the male, there is no future for the species. A dark fate which a certain matriarch will not allow. A new brood must be made, a thriving legacy implanted to replace what had been slain, to avenge what was lost. Earthquakes rattle Kyushu. Janjira's nuclear facility falls shortly thereafter, though it's likely the workers are able to evacuate safely. The power plant's radioactive core is siphoned by a titan rivaling that of Godzilla, MUTO Prime. Technically, because the first Zilla was the first public titan, he and his brood would have been called MUTOs. But for the sake of identification clarity, know that when I say MUTO or MUTO Prime, you can just replace MUTO with Parasite if you wanted the actual name they call these things in this timeline. Returning to the scenario, Heat is contacted, arriving shortly after the destruction of the power plant to investigate. Military forces would no doubt be flooding the area, with applied experimental technologies vowing to support Monarch or Japan in any way they can. Walter Simmons is on good terms with Dr. Ifukube after all. A strong public showing would no doubt do wonders for not only his company's reputation, but the relationship he possesses with his new star employee. Back to the team, Heat traces Prime's trail back to Kyushu, uncovering the local myths surrounding the Thunder Beetle. Of all the members of Heat, this is where Elsie Chapman, the leader of the team, gets to flaunt her expertise to her subordinates. As the team's paleontologist and chief biologist, she'd likely be able to date Dagon's remains and the myth of Dagon to roughly the same time period. Add in Nigel's exploration of MUTO Prime's den, a den I should note is unoccupied in this timeline. The biological material they'll find connects the matriarch to the male parasite Zilla just killed. Even without the Siberian den's discovery, as that grave of Godzilla was ultimately found in the year 2004, Heat can piece together what is going on. MUTO Prime, a super predator which seemingly goes after members of the Godzilla species, is active once again. Active most likely to replace the progeny lost by their actions. What they can also determine is where MUTO Prime is going. Following quakes along the Ring of Fire, not to mention reports of lost nuclear submarines off Guam, the matriarch is clearly headed toward the Atlantic, toward Godzilla. So as Heat races to stop history from repeating itself, one question remains. Where is Godzilla? Where is the Alpha of Earth? Well, he's dealing with the events which would be unfolding from episode 18 of the animated series, An Early Frost. Just as a quick refresher, Cameron Winter's desire to replace Zilla would instead be replaced by besting Godzilla. I mean, why would the smartest man on the world concern himself with a pawn when he can usurp a king? Would he frame Godzilla for destruction of public property like in the original episode to then sell his chameleon mutation? Probably not. Do remember that Godzilla's reputation is already in the gutter, considering he's protecting artificial titans, at least those that bend the knee. All that matters here is if Cameron's creation can beat Godzilla, not ruining his public image. And again, the answer is probably not. Even if we assume that the chameleon has some of Godzilla's DNA, that wouldn't close the gap between the artificial creation and the Alpha of Earth. An Alpha who should have a clear edge in durability, firepower and experience. Also, while Cameron said he specifically designed the chameleon to best Zilla in the original episode, while that might be partially true, one just needs to take one glance at this thing, a thing which has a mouth for a stomach, to know it's not an ultimate weapon, but a biological mistake Cameron is doing his best to upsell. Even if Nick and his team bought the lie full hook and sinker, Godzilla's not taking the bait. He'd likely reduce the chameleon to ash in a battle deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Ultimately, the ramifications of this battle is a distracted Godzilla and one very enraged tech CEO. Returning to Heat, they at this point have lost track of MUTO Prime. There are no earthquakes, no further attacks on nuclear submarines or power plants. So without any further leads, Elsie leads the team home to New York. Their priority, along with the rest of Monarch, which again Heat is a part of, is finding Godzilla. Randy likely isn't all that concerned about the situation. I mean, the king's likely on his way to put down the super predator. Elsie, unable to hide her worry, notes that this species, Titanus jinshin mushi, evolved to hunt down other titans, even other Godzillas. The species, or at least the Prime, likely relies on stealth to blindside their target in their own territory, something affirmed in the carvings involving Dagon, and a theory supported by the fact they can't detect where the predator is now. If they can't find Godzilla, MUTO Prime will. New York then shakes. Subways fill with water either from liquefaction or cracks within their tunnels. Unreinforced aging buildings not connected to bedrock fall one after the other. In under a minute, the damage left in the quake's wake would exceed Zilla's attack in 1998, exceed even Godzilla's tsunami. It's a humanitarian disaster, and the cause bursts through rock and cement. MUTO Prime. Heat realized too late that Prime isn't after Godzilla. It wants revenge for its young. It wants Zilla. So picking a fight in his backyard, Zilla happily obliges and bursts onto the scene, meeting the matriarch's might with emerald atomic fire. Heat and the military attempt to make it onto the scene, yet chaos brought upon by the disaster slows them down. MUTO Prime can't create the same magnitude 12 earthquakes like she could in the Pacific, especially with no fault line near New York City to exploit. The magnitude luckily is less severe, but for a city not meant to withstand such natural phenomena, even a magnitude 5 or 6 leaves devastation in its wake. This leaves Zilla alone in a vicious 1v1 with MUTO Prime. Having presumably infected past Titans, the MUTO likely exceeds Titanus Jira's experience. Also, her immense size and ability to match Godzilla's strength likely puts her in another weight class. Not one Zilla can't go toe-to-toe with for a time, but one that does generally favor the parasite in a long battle. Lastly, the MUTO species as a whole have specifically adapted to kill giant radioactive fire-spewing lizards, a trait which ensures Zilla Jr.'s atomic ray won't do much. A stark contrast to MUTO Prime's scream, which ruptures Zilla's dorsal shoots. The reptile falls from sheer anguish. A follow-up blow by Prime ensures Zilla is helpless as the next generation of MUTO is implanted within him. Her mission accomplished, MUTO Prime descends beneath rock and cement, allowing Zilla to retreat to his own den nearby. Hours pass. Monarch, the military, and emergency response elements converge upon a broken city, doing their best to save the lives they can. Unfortunately for Heat, the team realize that one life in particular seems destined to be lost if they don't act. So what's the plan? Well, Nigel's gonna get a few scans, cluing in Heat, Monarch, and most importantly Serizawa to what is going on inside the reptile. 2 parasites have been implanted. Each are growing, siphoning radiation and other nutrients from their host. Perhaps in days, if not weeks, Monarch's companion will lose his life. Randy recommends just poisoning the parasites, yet Elsie shoots back, explaining that Zilla is essentially a filter. Enough poison to kill the pair would also kill the host. An outcome Serizawa stresses he does not want to let transpire, especially since if Zilla dies, Monarch would be next on the chopping block. Audrey's truthful reporting is helping with public perception, but even she can only do so much if the routine savior of the day bites the dust. Worrisome as well, nearby aftershocks indicate MUTO Prime's close proximity to New York City, monitoring the situation to ensure this generation of parasites survives. And how is she monitoring Zilla? Well, she has a few spies, specifically the parasites within him, as they are not only alive, they're talking, which just makes removing them that much more troublesome. For example, if they are in danger, they're just gonna call Mom. Calls which seem to emit a small yet potent electromagnetic pulse, rendering machinery like Nigel ineffective. All this is to say, man, not machine, will need to kill the spores. And when killed, the radiation exposure will likely ensure whoever goes inside Zilla won't be coming out. Thus, a dire reality descends upon the group. Distracting MUTO Prime with Godzilla is the easiest part of the plan to formulate. The real hard part is deciding who is going inside and won't be coming out. Even though Elsie disapproves, Nick volunteers first, not wanting anyone else to lose their lives for his monster. And contrary to what you may think, Serizawa doesn't offer himself up in this situation. He actually has an alternative. One, Monique Dupre. The French likely have been in hot water geopolitically speaking since the last part. While I could detail the back and forth between Monarch and the country, I'll shorten this section just to say the sacrifice of one operative, one that was tasked to keep an eye on Heat for the past few months, I think is a trade no one in the French Secret Service would likely turn down. So Monique joins the group and prepares with Nick to enter Zilla. Artificial roars mimicking Godzilla lure the Leviathan to New York, stirring MUTO Prime. Monique and Nick wait for the battle. Wait for the MUTO Prime and Godzilla to clash in New York's harbor, merely for the unthinkable to occur. The matriarch bows. Because despite the past killings of Godzilla species, despite Monarch's belief that the two would tear each other apart at first sight, they couldn't have been more wrong. Because what is balance if not allowing your natural enemy to survive? What is fair in choosing your own kind over another? The actions of MUTO Prime are not revelations to Godzilla. In fact, he's allowed these events to go on for eons. In the normal timeline, I'd argue what broke this arrangement is twofold. The male and female MUTOs openly rebelling against Godzilla under the direct watch of their matriarch, and the lack of another sufficient titan for MUTO Prime to hunt. It's hard for me to swallow that Godzilla did not in some way allow these events to occur in the past. He most likely would have intervened in MUTO Prime's attacks against his kind. He would have attacked the male when it burrowed into Janjira. All this is to say, Monarch is at a loss, leaving Zilla's grim fate all but certain. Day turns to night. Nick vents his frustration, his anger, his helplessness to Audrey, who listens to his every word. There isn't anything he or anyone can do for his friend. The parasites will continue to grow, to leech his friend's life until nothing is left. Audrey, doing her best to relate, notes that in a way it's not all that different from a terminal cancer. Sometimes the body isn't strong enough, no matter how much help it gets, like chemo or radiation. And it's on that dour note that hope fills Nick once more. After a show of affection, Nick bolts back to Heat headquarters and works tirelessly, requesting the team to return to make the impossible happen. Slight tangent, but I do want to note that likely return means Mendel shepherding or being the designated driver for Elsie and Randy's more drink-oriented way to deal with Zilla's current predicament. They return to Heat headquarters and hear Nick's desperate gamble, a plan Elsie full-heartedly agrees to and sets into action. So using a cleared cargo vessel, Zilla is lured upon the transport and moved to the open sea just like Kong was in Godzilla vs. Kong. Military elements sanctioned by Hicks and Serizawa protect the lizard as the ships make their way east. Now, MUTO Prime wouldn't stand by as her prey moves. She'd likely follow, except there is one issue. The cries of her young multiply exponentially. Remember how Nigel detected the young were talking? Well, a few recordings later, those same conversations are now being played on uncrewed vessels across the Atlantic. It's a vast audio smokescreen thanks to the resources of Monarch to hide where Zilla is going. And for the MUTO Prime to find Titanish Jira, she'll need to destroy every single one or get really lucky. Either way, it'll be a time-consuming venture, which should give Heat the necessary few days to travel to a landscape of ice and rock, where the sun's energy may hold the key to saving Titanis Jira. Apologies for the interruption, but by far most of you are not subscribed. To stay up to date with these future releases, please consider doing so, or at the very least, leaving a like. Thank you. The plan is actually quite simple. As a member of Monarch for years, and likely someone who knew of this global anomaly, Nick hopes to focus cosmic radiation into Titanis Jira to hopefully strengthen his body against the things that lie within him. It's a bit of a gamble, to be honest. A hope that Zilla's cells can grow, strengthen, and overwhelm the parasites within before the spores kill their host. Because remember, they'll be absorbing this radiation too. There is also another problem, which is why the military is joining this risky venture. Something already stirs within this lair. Not Tiamat, but an Abzu. The military engage. Ships are struck by a monster beneath the waves. Is this a massacre like what Godzilla enacted in the Tasman Sea in Godzilla vs. Kong? No. Greater technological advancement should give the military an eventual win over this super species. But there is one problem. Even weak and dying, Zilla isn't one to avoid a fight. Despite Nick's pleas, the reptile leaves the transport to battle the Abzu, a fight he's just too weak to win. And with Zilla caught in the crossfire, not to mention an endless amount of pink sludge, the naval forces just can't get a clear shot. They'd likely need to stand down, leaving Zilla's life in the hands of a single Titan, a nearby protector who's been following the group since they passed Scottish waters, Nessie. Because like what is said in one of my personal favorite films of all time, a true selfless act always sparks another. Nessie intervenes on Zilla's behalf, and while she does take damage filling the ocean with her blood, it is enough to overcome the Abzu just like Tiamat did, allowing Zilla to enter the lair. Solar winds begin to supercharge the reptile's cells, causing the spores to scream. If MUTO Prime didn't know where Titanis Jira was before, she definitely does now. And as quakes rip through the Atlantic, it's likely the rest of the operation team knows she's on her way too. Dozens of hours of dread break when MUTO Prime ascends beneath the freezing waters of the Arctic. Yet while the military get to strike first, it is Nessie who truly battles the super predator. Now on land, this would be a poor fight for the aquatic titan. Yet in the water, Nessie's speed and adeptness within her natural element keep things close. I doubt she could constrict or claw Prime to death. However, Prime can't rely on her overwhelming strength or sonic scream here. The latter is especially problematic because with water filling her mouth and lungs, MUTO Prime can't unleash the same potent screech she could in the open air. She'll need to take a solid breath first and disperse the water filling her lungs. And no matter how much Nessie fights, eventually Prime will get to the surface, acquire that needed breath, and let loose a devastating sonic cry, followed by a crippling blow. Nessie, friend and protector, sinks into the waves, her fate uncertain, before Prime carves a path of destruction toward her defiant prey. A fresh sonic scream quakes Zilla's frozen den. Ice and rock crash en masse, and while the reptile awakens, something else stirs in the waters nearby. MUTO Prime is blindsided by an unknown foe and dragged beneath the waves, coming face to face with a new enemy. Another Titan of vengeance, Titanis Leviathan. Being Nessie's mate, a far larger creature, and desiring some payback for the predator daring to hurt his significant other so badly, MUTO Prime is stuck in a fight she does not want any part of. Worse, she can even hear the deathly cries of her offspring, giving rise to a reborn artificial titan, evolved Zilla. Now I want to stress this was not part of Nick's plan. In fact, the original plan would have failed. While possessing super regeneration, days of the parasitic infection likely would make the Titan's body extremely weak. Too weak to adapt even when bestowed immense amounts of radioactive power. Luckily for Zilla Jr., it is Nessie who holds the key to this evolved state. As I mentioned in the previous part, with Nessie and Tiamat sharing an ancient ancestor, it is the genetic factor within their DNA and the blood that spilled into the open ocean during the fight with the Abzu that allowed Zilla to unlock this new form. Compared to Zilla's quickly changing genetic structure, the juvenile parasites just can't keep up and are overwhelmed. Thus, this evolved Zilla joins Leviathan's fight, a fight outside the matriarch's element, one where her strength holds no meaning and her experience comes up empty. Freshly regrown dorsal shoots slice and dice into the Prime's body until she goes still in the frozen waters off the Arctic. A juggernaut beaten by Titanus Leviathan and Titanus Jira. After the defeat of what I would argue is Zilla's first true rival, things slowly return to the status quo. I would be amiss not to point out that MUTO Prime's death at the hand of Zilla, reported by one Audrey Timmons, once again affirms the decision to go public was a correct one to Ishiro Serizawa. Faith in Monarch and the American Godzilla skyrocket even as New York continues to rebuild. A reconstruction campaign publicly sponsored by Applied Experimental Technologies. Also, with Monique's subterfuge in the first part now public, and trusting her far more than her mentor, Nick strongly recommends Elsie extend an open position to her. I mean, if France was going to sacrifice her, Monique may as well stick around and get to know the people she would have been dying for. And help she does as the events of episode 9, What a Long Strange Trip It's Been, takes center stage. When a giant bacteria runs rampant, while it would likely still affect Mendel, I can't see it doing much to Titanus Jira now. Thanks to his evolved form, his cells are likely able to adapt and fight off the infection once the bacillus is defeated, which is the perfect tangent to discuss evolved Zilla's enhancements. A pink coloration to his spines and atomic breath would be the most obvious new additions. An improved physical capability, greater molecular density for better durability, and an increased energy capacity would also likely follow. There are two distinct differences though between him and evolved Godzilla. For one, Zilla lacks Hollow Earth energy. His body can't replicate said power, so his atomic breath likely still resembles its flame-like appearance. The other difference is a new power which he unleashes against the Technosentient in episode 22's Juggernaut. I'll return to episode 20 and 21 in just a moment, but to recap episode 22, a machine-absorbing alien entity descends upon New York, growing in size with every mechanical device it absorbs. Now Mendel uses an EMP on the Technosentient with no effect. However, Zilla's packing far more power when he unleashes his own pulse, frying the entity and bestowing Walter Simmons with an interesting specimen to study, thanks to his good relations with Monarch. How would Zilla gain an EMP? Well, thanks to the evolutionary DNA of Nessie, thanks in part to the shared ancestry she shares with Tiamat, not only allowed him to surpass the spores within him, but gain a few key traits of the parasites. The ability to consume radioactive material and unleash an electromagnetic pulse being two such traits. Back to chronological order though, episode 20's website unleashes a monstrous Black Widow upon the world. It's possible Baphomet, residing near Outpost 68 in Morocco, could intervene, sensing a threat to its territory, but with no footage available of the creature, I'll say it's out of the monster's territorial range, allowing Godzilla, king of the monsters, to end the spider threat before Heat can intervene. The Alpha would likely sense the spider prior to the brood's attack on the military. Heat never gets a chance to intervene as Godzilla razes the island to ash and bone, a situation which would not reoccur for episode 21's When Wedding Bells Blew. A mutated manta descends on New York, seeking refuge from the heat wave striking the region. Fun side note, this actually lines up perfectly with my current date system for the scenario, as the release date for episode 21 is August 14th, 1999, a day which did have a bit of a heat wave reaching 84 degrees for the city. Anyway, while the manta may be a nuisance and definitely destructive, when confined within a frigid environment like a hockey ring, the mutation's temper cools. And while I'd like to say the mutant manta ray eventually escapes, clashing with evolved Zilla, thanks to Monarch's immense technological resources and manpower, the technological difficulties Heat faced, which allowed the ray to escape in the first place, wouldn't happen here. Relocation of the mutant occurs safely, its new home likely the northernmost reaches of Canada or the Arctic. A happy ending which definitely does not happen for the Silver Hydra in episode 23's Shafted. A being seemingly composed of living rock, the Silver Hydra ensnares its prey in molten silver. Heat are likely thrown for a loop when facing this blob-like foe, yet Titanus Jira's overwhelming firepower should be enough to vanquish it. Whether it be killing it with water or violet fire vaporizing the strange entity to atoms, Evolved Zilla will take the win. Speaking of winning, it is something a certain lifeform is certainly doing in episode 24's Trust No One. Because trust is probably not something the French have, even for Monarch after their reconciliation. A standard special ops team is sent to French Guiana to dispose of a potentially dangerous asset. Flamethrowers, gunfire, depth charges, a thorough scorched earth policy is enacted. The Mimic, able to replicate anyone and anything by manipulating its DNA, remains undetected. While the French military likely destroys its other half, a half it can't find because it lacks the hacker skills needed to recover said information, the entity is able to slink away, its sights set on France itself. While the nation may be on a bit of a losing streak, one person that is definitely winning is Walter Simmons. Positive PR from helping Monarch best MUTO Prime, his company's efforts to rebuild New York following said creature's attack, not to mention the technological goldmine that is the Techno-Sentient, paint a bright future for his efforts to craft an Apex Titan of his own. The Sentient in particular is able to eliminate one of the main issues with the original MonsterVerse Mechagodzilla, that being computing power. There is no need for a biological computer based out of the bones of an old Titan when one can reverse engineer something that is likely superior. All which remains is a power source, the energized blood of his Apex Titan. And on that front, Walter Simmons ends up falling short despite the technological breakthroughs he has made. But myth and legend in theory paint a possible solution his company can exploit. A power locked within the earth that powers the king he wishes to usurp. First, he just has to get there. So investment into Skull Island, into Outpost 33's capabilities, begin. Shifting topics to another CEO, Cameron Winter is not having the best time. His mutations would likely be failing, his machines falling behind the competition, who are rebranding themselves to the more infuriating name of Apex. Would Cameron really attempt to demonstrate his machine's capabilities when he knows they pale to the competition? Would he really risk such an embarrassment? I really don't think so. This means episode 25's Lizard Slayers, where Cameron's machines go after Zilla, just doesn't come to fruition. Cameron Winter, doubling down on his own pride and genius, decides to focus his entire company into genetic engineering. He will create a Titan which can beat Godzilla, a perfect pet using every Titan's DNA, a chimera able to bestow himself the status of king. But can such a hybrid actually be born? Can Walter Simmons really find a way into the Hollow Earth 2 decades before he did so originally? And what of Zilla? Will this new evolved state continue to change him, to evolve him in new and possibly detrimental ways? All those questions and more will be answered in an eventual third part. But I'll leave you on one final note. 4 months. That is how long it took the Leviathans to infiltrate humanity, to orchestrate their invasion plans, and build a cybernetic monstrosity from the body of the original Zilla. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, those 4 months would be wasted here. But you know how long it's been since the MUTO Prime died in this universe? 8. 8 months. And you know, that's got me thinking. I wonder what the Leviathans could create in that amount of time. Sadly, that is an inquiry I must leave unanswered for the near future. Next time on What If Kaiju though, I'll be covering a scenario chosen by 23 Travs, who makes videos like these possible for you to enjoy. If you want a chance for your own scenario to be covered on the channel though, or wish for a third part to be made faster, become a member today. You'll get plenty of perks like voting on every scenario, just like the next entry, What If Godzilla Jr. was in the MonsterVerse. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm Grayshaw151, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, later.